The snow started coming down just after 9 p.m., the heavy kind that makes Colorado highways look clean and harmless right before they turn dangerous. I had just left Fort Carson after a late security briefing. Nothing dramatic, just routine updates, clearance reminders, and a long conversation about operational discipline. I remember thinking I should have left earlier, but Army schedules don't really care about snow forecasts. Highway 24 was nearly empty. The mountains were dark shapes against a cloudy sky, and the road crews hadn't caught up yet. I kept my speed steady hands at 10 and 2 the way I was taught long before I ever put on a uniform. I've driven in worse. I grew up here. Snow doesn't scare me. What scared me was the brake pedal. I pressed it gently as I approached a curve I've taken 100 times before. The car didn't slow down. It didn't respond at all. I pressed harder. The pedal felt wrong, soft, then useless. The car picked up speed. For a split second, I thought it was black ice. That's what your brain does. It looks for something normal, something reasonable. I eased the wheel, tried to downshift, pumped the brakes again. Nothing. The guardrail came at me faster than it should have. The back tires slid sideways, and the world turned white. The sound wasn't dramatic. It was metal scraping and something snapping underneath. Then the car tipped. My seatbelt locked. My shoulders slammed against the door. I remember the airbag exploding in my face and the smell of burned fabric. Then everything tilted and dropped. The car stopped moving at the bottom of a slope about 20 feet below the road. Not a cliff. Just enough of a drop to wreck the front end and knock the air out of me. My ears rang. I tasted blood. I tried to move, but my body didn't cooperate. Through the cracked windshield, I saw headlights above me. A black SUV pulled over on the shoulder. Even upside down in a wrecked sedan, I recognized that vehicle. Vanessa. My sister stepped out slowly, her boots careful on the snow. She walked toward the guardrail and looked down. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't call my name. She just stood there. I couldn't hear much over the ringing in my ears, but I could see her silhouette against the headlights. Hands in her coat pockets. Still. Watching. Time stretched in a strange way. It could have been 30 seconds. It felt longer. Then she pulled out her phone. The red and blue lights came later. EMTs climbed down the slope, cut the driver's side door open, stabilized my neck, asked me questions I couldn't answer clearly. I drifted in and out while they loaded me onto a stretcher. I looked for Vanessa again when they lifted me up toward the road. She was standing farther back now, talking to someone. Calm. Too calm. I tried to say her name. I'm not sure if any sound came out. The next clear memory I have is fluorescent lighting and a steady beeping sound. I woke up in Evans Army Community Hospital with a pounding headache and a stiff neck brace holding me in place. A nurse noticed my eyes open and came over immediately. She spoke slowly, professionally. Mild concussion. No internal bleeding. A few deep bruises. Lucky, she called it. Lucky. I asked where my sister was. The nurse checked the chart and hesitated just enough for me to notice. The person listed as your emergency contact left after you were admitted, she said. She didn't stay. Left. That word hit harder than the crash. I asked if she signed any paperwork. Insurance forms. Anything. She dropped off your purse at the front desk and left, the nurse explained. No signatures. No additional information. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting that settle. Vanessa and I aren't exactly best friends, but she's still my only immediate family. We lost our parents 6 years ago. Whatever problems we've had, I never expected her to walk away from a hospital bed. I checked my phone once they returned it to me from a plastic belongings bag. 15 missed calls from an unknown number. No messages from Vanessa. Instead, I had 3 high-priority alerts from the private bank that manages our family trust. That woke me up more than the concussion. The Cole Family Trust is not small. It holds investments, property shares, and accounts my parents built over 30 years. I'm the appointed trustee. My name alone is authorized to approve distributions. That wasn't an accident. My father believed in structure. Vanessa believed in spontaneity. The notifications showed 3 attempted transfer requests submitted within hours of my accident, all pending my approval. The amounts weren't minor. 6 figures combined. I checked the timestamps. They were sent while I was unconscious in the ER. My headache suddenly felt very different. I replayed the last week in my mind. Vanessa insisting my brakes felt a little soft. Vanessa offering to take my car to a friend's garage because she knew a guy. Vanessa brushing off my suggestion to use the certified mechanic near base. She had returned the car that same evening, told me everything was fine, even joked that I drove like a grandma and needed more excitement in my life. I looked at the ceiling again, but this time I wasn't dazed. I was calculating. In the Army, you're trained to separate emotion from assessment. Facts first, feelings later. Right now, the facts didn't line up. Brake failure on a clear mechanical system. 6-figure transfer attempts. Emergency contact leaves hospital without signing anything. Coincidences exist. Patterns also exist. I asked the nurse if I could sit up. She adjusted the bed slowly. The room steadied after a moment. My body hurt, but my head was clear enough. As a military intelligence officer with a top secret clearance, I don't get the luxury of pretending things are fine when they aren't. Any incident that could impact my stability, finances, or public record has to be reported. If Vanessa was about to start telling people I was mentally compromised after a head injury, that could cost me more than money. It could cost me my career. I pulled up the bank portal again and froze the pending transactions. That part was easy. My authorization blocked them automatically. I leaned back and took a slow breath. The accident could have been weather. The transfer attempts could have been desperation. Vanessa leaving could have been shock. All three together didn't feel like shock. They felt like timing. Outside my hospital room window, the snow kept falling quiet and steady over Colorado Springs. Inside, the heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, indifferent to family dynamics and bank alerts. I stared at my phone screen at the transfer request details, at the name of the initiating account tied to Vanessa's login credentials. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to one name I rarely had to use for personal reasons. Thomas Riley, our family attorney. My thumb hovered over the call button for half a second before I pressed it. The line started ringing. The phone rang twice before Thomas picked up. His voice sounded half awake but sharp, the way good attorneys always sound when something is wrong. I kept it simple. Car crash. Brake failure. 3 6-figure transfer attempts from the trust while I was unconscious. My emergency contact left the hospital without signing anything. He didn't interrupt. That's one of the reasons my father trusted him. Freeze everything, he said. No distributions without your direct in-person authorization. I'll notify the bank in writing. It's already frozen, I told him. I blocked the requests. A short pause. Good. I didn't accuse Vanessa of anything. Not yet. I stuck to facts. He asked about the vehicle, where it was towed, whether insurance had been notified. I didn't have answers. The hospital staff only told me I was transported by civilian EMS. The rest was blank space. Thomas told me not to confront anyone, not to post online, not to text Vanessa. If this is what it looks like, she'll make mistakes. Let her. I ended the call and sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of that advice. Let her. The nurse came back in to check my vitals. Blood pressure steady, pupils responsive. She asked if I had someone picking me up once I was discharged. I said I'd arrange it. Your sister hasn't called, she added not unkindly. Just informational. I nodded like it didn't matter. But it did. Vanessa and I weren't close, but we weren't strangers either. After our parents died, we handled the estate together. I took over the trust because I'm the one who reads contracts and doesn't gamble on opportunities. She handled the house sale and cried through most of it. We split everything evenly except the trust management. That part required structure. Over the past year, she'd asked for advances 3 times. The first 2 were framed as short-term investments. The third was vague. I declined that one. She didn't take it well. I checked the timestamps again on the transfer attempts, submitted through her user credentials tied to the trust's secondary access portal. The portal requires 2-factor authentication. That meant she had access to her own phone when those requests were made. I looked at the time of my crash on the police report summary in my discharge packet. 9:47 p.m. The first transfer request was submitted at 11:12 p.m. I was in a trauma bay at 11:12 p.m. That wasn't desperation at midnight. That was scheduling. I asked the nurse if there was a record of who provided my personal belongings. She checked the intake log. Vanessa's name was listed as the person who handed over my purse and phone. What time, I asked. She scanned the screen. 10:31 p.m. 10:47 was the crash. 10:31 was intake of belongings. 11:12 was first transfer attempt. The timeline tightened. When the doctor came in to clear me for release, he emphasized rest. No driving for at least a week. Limited screen time. Monitor for headaches or confusion. Any dizziness, memory gaps, he asked. Just the normal kind, I said. He gave me a look that suggested he'd heard that joke before. Before signing the discharge papers, I requested a full copy of my medical evaluation. Cognitive test results included. I didn't say why. I didn't need to. I've sat in enough security briefings to know documentation is protection. Back in my room, I powered on my phone again. A new notification popped up. This one wasn't from the bank. It was from Facebook. Vanessa had gone live. The thumbnail showed her sitting in her living room. Hair pulled back. No makeup. Tissue in hand. The caption read, "Prayers for my little sister. Head trauma is serious." I stared at it for a second before tapping. Her voice was soft, controlled. She explained that I had suffered a severe accident and was struggling mentally. She said she was trying to manage things while I recovered. She hinted at difficult decisions ahead. She never said I was incompetent. She didn't have to. The comments were full of sympathy. People offering support. A few asking how they could help. One even suggested she seek legal guardianship just in case. I ended the video before it finished. This wasn't panic. It was positioning. I called my unit's security manager before the rumor mill could reach him first. I reported the accident, the hospitalization, and the fact that misinformation was circulating online about my mental status. He appreciated the heads up, asked direct questions. Any loss of consciousness, any diagnosis of traumatic brain injury, any medications that impair judgment, I answered cleanly. Mild concussion, no cognitive impairment, cleared by military physician. He noted it and said there would be a routine review. Standard procedure when medical events intersect with clearance holders. Standard. That word calmed me more than anything else. By late afternoon, Angela Ruiz showed up at the hospital. We've known each other since high school. She works as a civilian nurse, not at Evans, but close enough to know how things operate. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She didn't stay, Angela asked. No. She went live online, Angela added. I saw. Angela folded her arms. That's not concern. That's narrative control. Exactly. I asked if she'd drive me to my condo instead of base housing. Fewer eyes. Fewer questions. She agreed without hesitation. As we walked out, I signed my own discharge paperwork. No emergency contact required. The cold air outside hit harder than I expected. My body ached in ways that would take days to settle. Angela helped me into the passenger seat of her SUV. I watched the hospital entrance shrink in the rearview mirror. On the drive, I texted Vanessa for the first time since the crash. Just discharged. I'm fine. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Thank God, she replied. I've been so worried. We need to talk about some important decisions. Important decisions. I didn't respond. At my condo, I moved slowly but deliberately. I checked the garage. My parking spot was empty, obviously. No tow slip left behind. No insurance paperwork on the counter. Nothing from Vanessa explaining what happened. Angela made tea and hovered like she always does when she thinks I won't admit I'm hurting. I want you to consider something she said. If she's telling people you're unstable, that could snowball. I know. Do you think this was just money? I thought about the transfer amounts, the live stream, the timeline, the brake pedal going soft under my foot. I think it's about control, I said. That night, instead of resting like the doctor ordered, I logged into the Trust's back-end portal from my secure laptop. I reviewed access logs beyond the transfer attempts. There was another login earlier that evening, 9:03 p.m., before my crash. The IP address wasn't mine. I copied the log details into a separate encrypted file and sent them to Thomas. Then I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a second. If someone wanted to argue this was coincidence, they'd need better timing. My phone buzzed again. Another live notification. Vanessa had posted an update. This time the caption read, "Considering filing emergency guardianship for her safety." I opened the comments. Someone tagged a local attorney who specialized in family court. I didn't feel shock anymore. I felt clarity, and clarity is more dangerous than panic. I zoomed in on the login details and traced the IP address through the bank's access history. It originated from Vanessa's home network, 9:03 p.m. Login, 9:47 p.m. Crash, 10:31 p.m. She hands over my belongings at the hospital, 11:12 p.m. First transfer request. I sent the IP data to Thomas with one line. This was before the accident. He responded within minutes. Do not confront her. Preserve everything. I shut the laptop and leaned back, carefully aware of the dull pressure behind my eyes. Concussions aren't dramatic, but they remind you you're human. I pressed my fingers to my temples and focused on breathing steady. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't social media. It was my unit's S2 office. The security manager requested I report in person the next morning for a follow-up discussion regarding public allegations affecting clearance integrity. Professional wording. Not accusatory, just precise. That's how careers get protected or derailed. I slept lightly that night. Not from fear, from calculation. At 600 the next morning, I put on a clean uniform. My movements were slower than usual, but deliberate. The mirror reflected a faint bruise along my jaw and a small cut near my hairline. Nothing dramatic, nothing unstable. Angela watched from the kitchen. You sure you're good to drive? She asked. I'm not driving, I said. You are. She nodded. No argument. Fort Carson looked the same as always when we pulled through the gate. Soldiers heading to PT. Civilian employees with coffee cups. Routine, predictable. The Army doesn't pause because one officer had a bad night on a highway. Inside the S2 office, the security manager didn't waste time. He had Vanessa's live stream pulled up on his screen. Captain Cole. We've received multiple external messages referencing this video, he said evenly. Some include claims regarding your cognitive stability. I anticipated that I replied. He reviewed my medical discharge summary, the cognitive screening results, and the attending physician's notes. Any diagnosed TBI beyond mild concussion? No. Any prescribed medication that impairs judgment? No. He leaned back slightly. You did the right thing reporting this immediately. That protects you. That sentence mattered more than he probably realized. However, he continued, if a petition is filed in civil court claiming incompetence, that will trigger an automatic review. Not punitive. Just procedural. Procedural. There's that word again. I understand, I said. Keep documentation. Keep communication professional. And if this escalates, notify us before we hear about it from someone else. I assured him he would. Outside the building, I paused for a moment before heading to the parking lot. The air was sharp and cold. My head throbbed faintly, but my thoughts were clear. Vanessa wasn't just positioning socially. She was laying groundwork legally. By noon, Thomas confirmed it. She filed this morning, he said over the phone. Emergency guardianship petition in El Paso County. On what basis? Claiming concern over traumatic brain injury and impaired decision-making. She attached partial medical intake notes. Not the full evaluation. Of course she did. When's the hearing, I asked. 48 hours. That's standard for emergency review. Judge hasn't granted anything yet. Just set a hearing. 48 hours. She moved fast. I opened my secure file folder and added another document, full cognitive evaluation signed and dated by the military physician. I also requested a formal letter from my commanding officer verifying I was on active duty status with no performance issues. Thomas was already drafting our response. She's arguing that your financial decisions could be compromised, he said, specifically referencing the trust. She tried to withdraw 6 figures while I was unconscious, I replied. I know. We'll introduce that. By late afternoon, Vanessa went live again. This time she looked more serious. Less tears. More urgency. She told her audience she was taking steps to protect the family legacy. She mentioned the trust by name. She said I had been isolated since the accident and was not thinking clearly. She never accused me of anything specific. She just planted doubt. The comment section shifted tone. Less sympathy. More concern. A few people suggested she was brave for stepping in. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. Angela sat across from me at the kitchen table watching the screen. She's trying to get ahead of something she said. She already did, I answered. The timing of the IP login kept replaying in my mind. 9:03 p.m. Before the crash. Before the guardrail. Before the airbags. That wasn't someone reacting to tragedy. That was someone initiating something. I called the towing company listed on the preliminary police report. They confirmed my vehicle had been picked up and transferred to a secondary storage facility, pending insurance instructions. Who authorized the transfer, I asked. Listed contact, the dispatcher replied. Vanessa Cole. Of course. Where is it now? She gave me the name of a private auto yard on the industrial edge of town. I wrote it down. Thomas advised we request a formal hold through law enforcement to prevent disposal. If the brakes were tampered with, we needed chain of custody intact. No backyard inspections. No dramatic confrontations. Just process. That evening, I reviewed the guardianship petition documents Thomas forwarded to me. Vanessa described me as disoriented, emotionally unstable, and potentially unable to manage financial responsibilities. She cited my military deployment history as a possible stress factor. That was new. She was leaning into stereotypes now. I forwarded the petition to my commanding officer with a brief note, for awareness. Legal counsel engaged. He responded within minutes. We support you. Provide any documentation required. Professional. Direct. Steady. At 2100, my phone buzzed again. A text from Vanessa. We don't need lawyers. This can stay in the family. I stared at it for a long moment. The phrase sounded almost reasonable. If you ignore the brake pedal. If you ignore the IP login. If you ignore the 6-figure transfer attempt. I typed back 3 words. See you in court. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, a new notification appeared 30 minutes later. Vanessa had updated her live stream caption. Emergency hearing scheduled. Praying for clarity. Clarity. That word stayed with me. I opened my laptop again and organized every document in chronological order. Crash report. Medical evaluation bank logs. P-data live stream timestamps. Facts. Dates. Numbers. Emotion doesn't win hearings. Evidence does. As midnight approached, I set my alarm and laid out my dress uniform for the morning of the hearing. Not because I needed to prove something, but because if my sister expected to walk into that courtroom uncontested, she had miscalculated the one thing she should have understood better than anyone. I don't walk away from a fight I didn't start. I tightened the collar of my dress uniform and adjusted the ribbons until they sat straight. 5 days after the crash, I walked into the El Paso County Courthouse with Thomas at my side, and a folder thick enough to make a statement on its own. My head still carried a faint ache, but nothing that affected my balanced speech or judgment. I made sure of that before I left the condo. The hallway outside the courtroom was already crowded. Vanessa stood near the far wall in a navy blazer, hair perfectly styled, a concerned expression carefully arranged across her face. 2 women from her social circle hovered nearby, whispering. She looked composed, confident. She didn't see me at first. Thomas leaned toward me. We let her speak first. Don't react. I won't, I said. Inside the courtroom, the air felt dry and formal. The judge reviewed paperwork while Vanessa's attorney organized his notes. I remained seated behind Thomas' posture, straight hands, folded loosely in my lap. Vanessa took the stand first. She spoke calmly about serious head trauma, about recent erratic behavior, about her concern that I was making financially dangerous decisions. She mentioned the trust. She mentioned my military career as high stress. She emphasized that she only wanted temporary guardianship until my sister stabilizes. She never looked in my direction. The judge flipped through the attached medical notes. These appear to be intake summaries, he said, not final evaluations. Her attorney responded smoothly. Your Honor, we are acting out of caution. Caution. The word hung there for a moment. The judge glanced toward the back of the courtroom. Is Captain Cole present? Thomas stood. Yes, Your Honor. Every head in the room turned. I rose and stepped forward. Vanessa's expression shifted in real time. Her eyes widened first. Then her posture stiffened. The color drained from her face in a way no makeup could hide. She had expected a no-show. I walked past her without a word and took the seat beside Thomas. I didn't rush. I didn't limp. I didn't sway. Just steady steps on polished tile. The judge examined me briefly. Captain Cole, you're currently serving active duty. Yes, Your Honor. And you were evaluated medically following the accident. Yes, sir. Thomas handed up the full medical report, including cognitive screening results, signed by the attending physician at Evans Army Community Hospital. He also submitted a letter from my commanding officer, verifying active status and no impairment of duty. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. These findings indicate no cognitive deficit, he said. That's correct, Thomas replied. Furthermore, Your Honor, there were 3 attempted 6-figure withdrawals from the family trust initiated by the petitioner within hours of my client's hospitalization. A ripple moved through the room. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Thomas continued calm and precise. Those transfers required Captain Cole's authorization. They were submitted while she was unconscious. Vanessa's attorney attempted to object, framing the withdrawals as pre-approved investment reallocations. Thomas countered with timestamp logs and access records. The judge looked back at Vanessa. Did you initiate these transactions? She hesitated half a second too long. I was trying to protect the assets, she said. My sister has been under stress for years. And the alleged brake failure, Thomas added. We've requested preservation of the vehicle for inspection. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. The judge raised a hand. This hearing concerns guardianship, not criminal allegations, he said firmly. However, the burden of proof for emergency guardianship is high. He turned back to Vanessa. Based on the medical evidence presented and the respondent's appearance here today, I find no basis for temporary guardianship. The words were clean, direct. Petition denied. Vanessa didn't argue. She didn't protest. She just stared forward, as if recalculating something internally. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Outside the courtroom, reporters weren't waiting. This wasn't national news. It was local family court. But a few bystanders recognized Vanessa from her live streams and whispered as she passed. She moved quickly toward the exit, heels sharp against the tile. Vanessa, I said. She stopped. For a second we stood facing each other in the courthouse hallway, the sound of distant conversations filling the space between us. You didn't have to show up like that, she said quietly. Like what? In uniform. I didn't dress for you, I replied. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Thomas, then back to me. This didn't have to escalate. I held her gaze. You filed the petition. She inhaled sharply. You're not thinking clearly. I am, I said evenly. That's the problem. She turned and walked away without another word. Thomas waited until she disappeared through the courthouse doors before speaking. She expected you to stay in bed, he said. She expected me not to see the login timestamp. He gave me a thin smile. Good start. Start. I didn't correct him. Back in the parking lot, I felt the cold air again, sharper this time, but easier to breathe. The guardianship threat had been neutralized quickly. But something about Vanessa's reaction unsettled me. She wasn't defeated. She was adjusting. Angela pulled up to the curb and rolled down the window. How'd it go? She asked. Denied, I said. She grinned. That was fast. Too fast, I replied. As we drove away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Vanessa had ended her live stream feed. Then she posted a new update. Court misunderstood the situation. Continuing to protect my family. I locked the screen without reading further. She wasn't backing down. That much was clear. What mattered now wasn't the courtroom victory. It was the car sitting in a private yard across town, and whether the brakes failed on their own. I slid the police report across the metal desk and pointed to the towing section. The patrol officer assigned to the follow-up didn't look impressed or skeptical. Just steady. He had probably seen 100 family disputes turn into financial complaints. Mine just happened to include a wrecked sedan. You're alleging brake tampering, he said. I'm requesting preservation of evidence, I replied. The vehicle was transferred by my sister without my authorization. There were attempted 6-figure withdrawals from a family trust while I was unconscious. I want the vehicle inspected before it's altered or destroyed. He studied me for a moment, then the paperwork. Your active duty. Yes. He nodded slightly. That mattered more than people realize. Active duty officers filing false reports don't last long. We can issue a hold pending inspection, he said. If there's mechanical evidence, we'll know. That was all I needed. Thomas coordinated with the yard owner that afternoon. The vehicle would not be moved, scrapped, or released without written authorization from law enforcement. 2 days later, I stood beside a forensic automotive examiner in a gray warehouse that smelled like oil and cold steel. My sedan looked smaller than I remembered. The front end was crushed inward. Airbags deflated like torn pillows. Snow residue still clung to the undercarriage. The examiner crouched beneath the vehicle with a flashlight. Brake system first, he muttered. I stayed back. No dramatic crawling under the frame. No touching evidence. Chain of custody matters. He worked methodically. Detached components. Documented everything. Photographed from multiple angles. Then he stopped. Here, he said. He angled the light toward a section of the rear brake line. Even from where I stood, I could see it. The rubber hose wasn't ruptured from pressure. It wasn't frayed from wear. It had a clean partial incision, not severed completely, just sliced deep enough that heavy braking would finish the job. The examiner zoomed in with a camera and took several close-up shots. This wasn't road debris, he said, and it wasn't corrosion. He stood and removed his gloves. Utility blade most likely. Straight edge, deliberate. My heartbeat didn't spike. It slowed. Could this happen accidentally during maintenance, I asked. Not like this, he said flatly. This is controlled damage. He documented the cut, bagged the compromised section properly, and sealed it for evidence transfer. No dramatic music, no cinematic reveal, just a thin slice in a brake line that almost killed me. Back outside the warehouse, I called Thomas. It's confirmed, I said. He didn't ask for details. He just exhaled once. I'll notify the detective. By evening, the charge discussion shifted from suspicion to potential criminal liability. The detective handling the case requested all related documentation, bank transfer logs, IP access records, and copies of Vanessa's guardianship filing. Motive matters. Brake sabotage alone is reckless endangerment. Brake sabotage tied to financial gain becomes something else. While the police processed evidence, I returned to my condo and pulled footage from my home security system. Not hidden cameras, just standard residential coverage. The night of the crash, before I left for the briefing, Vanessa had stopped by. She claimed she forgot something in the garage from a previous visit. The footage showed her walking toward the side door that connects to the garage. She was inside for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is longer than grabbing a forgotten purse. Later that same evening, after the crash, the cameras captured her returning briefly before heading to the hospital. She moved directly toward my office desk drawer where the trust documentation is stored. She opened it, closed it, then left. The audio clip from that night was quieter but usable. Her voice carried through the garage camera as she spoke on the phone. She's not dead, she said, but I'll get access. I replayed it once. That wasn't panic. That was planning. I exported the clip and sent it directly to the detective and Thomas. Within 24 hours, the tone of the investigation shifted again. The detective called me that afternoon. We're expanding this, he said. Your sister authorized the vehicle transfer in cash. That complicates things. Cash, I asked. Yes, private hauler. No insurance claim filed. Insurance claims leave paper trails. Cash leaves gaps. What about the garage she recommended, I asked. We're pulling records. If she arranged service there recently, we'll know. I thanked him and ended the call. Later that evening, Vanessa posted again. This time she was defensive. I've been attacked for trying to help, she said in her live stream. People don't understand what families go through privately. Her comments were no longer fully supportive. A few viewers questioned the court's denial of guardianship. Others asked why she attempted large transfers if I was unstable. She ignored those. Public sympathy has an expiration date when paperwork exists. My unit security manager called the next morning. We've reviewed the court outcome and your medical file, he said. No immediate clearance concerns. However, because there's an active criminal investigation involving you as the victim, this will remain under review. Under review. That phrase doesn't scare me. It motivates me. Promotion boards don't like unresolved investigations. They don't like drama. They don't like headlines. This needed to conclude cleanly. The detective requested I come in to give a formal statement regarding the brake tampering and financial activity. I complied fully, provided timeline documentation, answered questions directly. He asked one more before I left. Do you believe your sister intended to kill you? I paused. Belief doesn't matter in court. Evidence does. I believe she intended to remove me as an obstacle, I said. He wrote that down. By the end of the week, the district attorney's office was reviewing the file. Potential charges included criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, fraud attempt, and possibly more depending on the bank's cooperation. Vanessa stopped going live for 2 days. Silence from her was louder than any broadcast. Angela dropped by that night with takeout and her usual blunt commentary. She's cornered, she said. Cornered people don't always surrender, I replied. We sat at the kitchen table in quiet for a while. The condo felt smaller lately. Every notification sounded heavier. Around 9 p.m., my phone vibrated. Unknown number, I answered. A male voice introduced himself as a collections agent representing a private lending group. He asked if I was aware of Vanessa Cole's outstanding obligations and whether I would be assisting in repayment. I told him to remove my number from their system. He didn't argue. When I hung up, I looked at the wall clock. 9:03. The same timestamp that showed up in the bank access logs the night of my crash. Patterns don't lie. And Vanessa wasn't done moving pieces. I set my phone face down on the table and let the silence sit for a few seconds. 9:03 again. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the time her lenders called every night. Either way, patterns were stacking up and none of them favored her. The next morning started with an email from my chain of command marked for immediate review. That subject line gets attention fast. The brigade legal officer wanted clarification regarding external reputational risk. Not a charge. Not an accusation. Just risk. That's how the Army phrases discomfort. I drove onto base myself this time. The concussion symptoms had mostly faded, and I refused to look fragile in front of my own soldiers. If I was going to defend my career, I wasn't doing it from the passenger seat. Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker met me in his office. He didn't waste time with small talk. I've reviewed the police hold and the forensic report, he said. You did everything right. Thank you, sir. He leaned back in his chair. But perception matters. Promotion boards don't see nuance. They see keywords. Criminal investigation. Family dispute. Financial misconduct. Understood. You are not under investigation, he clarified. You're the victim. But the situation needs to close cleanly. That word again. Clean. He folded his hands. I need assurance that this won't escalate into something that compromises your position. I thought about Vanessa's live streams. The collectors calling. The break line sealed in an evidence bag. She's escalating because she's losing leverage, I said. Then finish it, he replied calmly. That wasn't pressure. That was expectation. Outside his office, I felt something I hadn't felt since the crash. Not fear. Focus. Vanessa went live again that afternoon. She had changed her tone. No more tears. No more soft lighting. She spoke directly to the camera, almost defensive. I've been misrepresented in court, she said. There are facts people don't know. My sister has been under enormous stress from deployments and financial responsibilities. There it was. She was leaning into the military angle harder now. PTSD. Burnout. Emotional volatility. None of it backed by evidence. But social media doesn't require evidence. It requires repetition. Within hours, one of the live stream clips was shared into a local Colorado Springs community group. Then someone forwarded it into a military spouse forum. And then it reached someone inside the contracting office that supports our unit. By 1600, the security manager called again. We're not concerned about your fitness, he said. But the volume of external chatter is increasing. I'm aware. We'll keep this internal unless something formal changes, meaning unless charges are filed publicly, which they would be. The detective updated me that evening. The district attorney had approved preliminary charges pending final review of financial intent. Reckless endangerment was almost certain. Fraud attempt likely. Additional charges dependent on proving motive tied to the trust. Has she retained counsel, I asked? Yes, of course she had. That night I reviewed my promotion timeline. My packet was scheduled for board review in 9 months. Performance report strong. Operational record clean. One unresolved criminal case, even as the victim can delay a board decision. Delay isn't denial, but in the Army timing is everything. Angela showed up again with coffee and blunt honesty. She's trying to make you look unstable, she said. If she can't control your money, she'll attack your credibility. She underestimated how much documentation I keep. Angela smirked. That's because she thinks emotionally. You think like a file cabinet. I'll take that as a compliment. The following afternoon, Vanessa attended a local real estate networking event. Normally I wouldn't know that, but a former client of mine forwarded a photo. Vanessa standing beside a banker who once managed portions of our family investments. The caption under the photo read, "Helping families protect what matters most." I almost laughed. Protect. By 7 p.m., Thomas called. She's been reaching out to financial contacts, he said. Trying to secure bridge loans. Using what collateral, I asked. Future inheritance assumptions. That tightened something in my chest. She can't leverage the trust, I said. She's trying to imply she has eventual access. The audacity would have been impressive if it wasn't attached to attempted break sabotage. The detective informed us that an arrest warrant request had been submitted to the DA's office based on the forensic findings and financial motive documentation. That's when the pressure changed shape. Public smear is annoying. An arrest is permanent. Vanessa must have sensed it, because that evening she texted me, "We need to talk, in person." No apology, no explanation, just urgency. I didn't respond. Minutes later, another text. You're blowing this out of proportion. Proportion. A partially severed brake line isn't proportion. It's physics. I locked the phone and focused on organizing my files again. Every document had to be precise. Every timestamp clear. Every claim backed. At 9:03 p.m., my phone vibrated once more. Unknown number. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. It was Vanessa's voice. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. We can fix this. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just we can fix this. I deleted the voicemail without replying. Across town, somewhere in a half-lit office or quiet living room, she was calculating again, figuring out angles, looking for leverage. But leverage disappears when paperwork stacks up. 2 days later, I received confirmation from the detective. The warrant had been signed. They would move when the timing was right. I set my phone down carefully and looked around my condo. Everything in this room was stable, organized, earned. Vanessa had tried to turn my accident into opportunity. Now opportunity was narrowing for her. And cornered people don't just talk. I adjusted the cuff of my blazer and checked the reflection in the hotel lobby glass. The Colorado Springs Business Alliance hosts a quarterly networking gala at the Broadmoor. It's not flashy, but it's the kind of room where reputations quietly solidify or unravel. Bankers, developers, retired officers, turned consultants. People who prefer paperwork over drama. Vanessa was on the guest list. So was I. Thomas had advised me not to avoid public spaces. Visibility is credibility, he said. And he was right. Hiding feeds rumors. Showing up closes them. The ballroom was warm and softly lit tables, spaced evenly waitstaff, moving efficiently. Conversations floated through the room. Real estate trends, commercial zoning updates, investment strategies. Nothing personal, until Vanessa entered. She wore red. Not subtle, not understated. The kind of color chosen to be noticed. She moved through the crowd with a composed smile, greeting familiar faces. A few people offered polite sympathy regarding my recovery. She nodded with controlled concern. She didn't overplay it this time. That told me she'd recalibrated. Across the room, I saw her approach Mr. Henderson, a retired banker, who once worked closely with my father. He listened while she leaned slightly closer than necessary. I walked in without announcement. No dramatic entrance, no spotlight. Just steady steps across carpet. Several heads turned. A few conversations paused. Not because I was the center of attention, but because I was standing upright, composed, and clearly not unstable. Vanessa noticed the silence before she saw me. When she turned, her smile stalled. Not dropped, not shattered. Just stalled. Her posture stiffened a fraction. The color in her face shifted again, less dramatic than the courthouse, but unmistakable. Mr. Henderson looked between us. Captain Cole, he said, offering his hand. Good to see you on your feet. Good to be here, I replied. Vanessa recovered quickly. I was just explaining how stressful the past week has been, she said smoothly. Family situations can spiral. They can, I agreed. Her eyes searched mine, trying to read whether I would challenge her publicly. I didn't. Instead, I addressed Mr. Henderson. I appreciate your discretion during this process, I said. The trust remains fully secured. His expression shifted subtly. Of course, he replied. We reviewed the access logs. Vanessa's shoulders tightened. Reviewed, she asked lightly. Yes, he said. We received formal notification from counsel. That's how reputations change quietly. Vanessa laughed softly, trying to diffuse the tension. There's been some confusion. There's been documentation, I corrected. The conversation didn't escalate. It didn't need to. The room had already absorbed the shift. Within minutes, 2 other financial contacts approached me directly. They didn't ask about the accident. They asked about the trust's stability. It was a professional conversation, which meant Vanessa's narrative was losing ground. Across the ballroom, I noticed a younger investor who had commented supportively on her live stream earlier in the week. He avoided eye contact now. Public sympathy fades when facts surface. Vanessa attempted to pivot. She approached a different group, 2 developers and a regional lender. I overheard fragments of her pitch as I moved past. Short-term liquidity issue, she said. Temporary. Temporary is what people say when permanent sounds frightening. One of the developers glanced toward me as she spoke. Have you discussed this with your sister? He asked her. We're in the middle of sorting things out, she answered carefully. He didn't look convinced. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. The gala wasn't about confrontation. It was about contrast. By the time dinner was served, the tone in the room had shifted subtly but decisively. Conversations that might have happened around Vanessa now drifted elsewhere. Reputation isn't destroyed by yelling. It's eroded by silence. Midway through the evening, my phone vibrated. A message from the detective. Warrant execution scheduled within 48 hours. Maintain distance. Maintain distance. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and finished my water. Vanessa approached me again near the bar. "You're enjoying this," she said quietly. "No, you showed up to humiliate me. I showed up because this is my community too." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand what kind of pressure I'm under." "I understand numbers," I replied. "And timing." For a second, something flickered across her face. Anger, maybe. Or fear. "You could still stop this," she said. "Stop what?" "Whatever you've set in motion." I held her gaze evenly. "You cut a brake line," I said calmly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it immediately. "That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact." She inhaled sharply, then forced composure. "You can't prove intent. Intent has a way of revealing itself." She stepped back, scanning the room as if calculating who might be listening. No one was close enough to hear specifics, but the tension was visible. "You think this ends well for you?" she asked quietly. "I think it ends with paperwork," I answered. That line unsettled her more than anger would have. By the end of the night, she left early. Not dramatically, just earlier than planned. Several attendees shook my hand on their way out. Not out of sympathy, out of reassurance. Stability matters to investors. Stability matters to the army. Angela met me in the lobby. "You didn't even raise your voice," she said. "I didn't need to." Outside, the air was colder than it had been earlier in the week. Clean. Sharp. As we walked to the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a security alert from my condo's camera system. Motion detected in the office area. I stopped walking. Angela noticed. "What is it?" I opened the app. The camera feed loaded slowly. The image came into focus. Someone was inside my condo, and I recognized the coat immediately. I zoomed in on the camera feed and held the phone steady. Vanessa was inside my office. She wasn't sneaking. She wasn't moving carefully. She was pulling drawers open with quick, impatient motions. Papers slid onto the floor. File folders opened and dropped. Angela looked over my shoulder. "Is that?" "Yes." I didn't panic. I tapped the security app and triggered the silent alarm option that sends a direct alert to local dispatch. Then I called the detective. "She's inside my condo," I said. "Office area." "Stay where you are," he replied. "Units are en route." I watched the live feed as Vanessa crossed toward the locked cabinet, where I keep the company seal and trust documents. She knew exactly where it was. That wasn't random searching. She tried the handle once, twice. Why? Then she reached into her purse. A key. My spare key. The realization hit clean and cold. I had given her that spare years ago for emergencies. I never asked for it back. She unlocked the cabinet. Inside was the heavy brass company seal and a folder containing notarized trust documents. She grabbed both without hesitation. That wasn't desperation. That was intent. The camera audio picked up her breathing, sharp and uneven. She muttered something I couldn't make out clearly. Angela squeezed my arm. "Police? On the way." The detective stayed on the line with me, coordinating with responding officers. "Do not return to the residence," he repeated. "I won't." Vanessa sat at my desk and pulled out a checkbook from the drawer. She flipped through pages, quickly scanning. She placed the company seal on the desk, lining it up with a blank check. Forgery. In real time, the front door camera alerted. 2 uniformed officers approached, quietly positioning themselves to either side of the entrance. They knocked once. Vanessa froze. She didn't answer. The officers knocked again, louder. Colorado Springs Police Department. The office camera showed her looking toward the hallway, eyes wide, calculating. She gathered the documents and stuffed them into her purse. The door camera showed one officer unlocking the door with a master access tool after announcing entry. The silent alarm had granted legal entry authorization. They moved fast. Within seconds, the office camera captured the moment the lights flicked on, and 2 officers stepped into frame. Vanessa stood up abruptly, knocking the chair back. "Ma'am, step away from the desk," one officer ordered. She raised her hands slightly but didn't fully comply at first. "This is my sister's home," she said. "I have access." "You are currently inside without the owner present," the officer responded. "Place your hands where we can see them." She hesitated again. That hesitation mattered. The second officer moved closer and secured her wrists behind her back. She protested loudly, then the composure gone. This is ridiculous. I'm protecting family assets. Ma'am, you're being detained pending further investigation. They removed the purse from her shoulder and placed it on the desk. The company seal and trust documents were visible inside. On the phone, the detective exhaled. That's enough, he said quietly. Angela and I stood in the hotel parking lot, watching everything unfold on a 5-inch screen. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation. The officers escorted Vanessa out of the condo a few minutes later. She was no longer composed. No controlled tone. No careful posture. Neighbors watched from across the hallway as she was led past them. Public humiliation wasn't my goal. Documentation was. The detective called back once she was secured. She'll be transported for booking, he said. Charges will include burglary and attempted fraud in addition to the pending reckless endangerment case. Understood. Your security footage will be added to the file. It's already backed up to cloud storage, I replied. He gave a short laugh. I figured. Angela looked at me after I ended the call. You okay? Yes. That answer surprised even me. The drive back to the condo was quiet. Police lights were still flashing faintly in the distance when we arrived. Officers were finishing evidence collection. They documented the forced cabinet access, the desk area, the seized documents. One officer approached me at the door. Captain Cole. Yes. You'll need to review and sign the evidence inventory. He handed me a clipboard. I scanned the list company seal trust documents, spare key purse contents, blank check with imprint alignment marks. Everything accounted for. Inside the condo, the space looked slightly disordered but intact. Drawers open. Papers scattered. I moved carefully, not touching anything until they cleared the scene. After the officers left, I stood alone in the office for a moment. The chair was still tipped over. The seal sat in an evidence bag on the desk. The spare key, my mistake from years ago, was tagged and logged. I closed the cabinet door slowly. My phone buzzed. Notification from the jail intake system confirming Vanessa Cole had been booked. Bond pending review. Within minutes, my unit's security manager emailed me. We've been notified of the arrest. Please forward booking documentation for our file. Efficient? Neutral? I attached the intake confirmation and sent it. No commentary. The news didn't stay private for long. By morning, a short article appeared in the local online bulletin, Colorado Springs woman arrested in alleged financial and property dispute. No mention of brake tampering yet. Just burglary and fraud attempt. Vanessa's social media accounts went silent. No live stream. No captions. Silence again, but this time different. The detective called later that afternoon. She's been formally charged on the burglary and fraud counts, he said. The brake tampering charges are being finalized pending DA review. Forensic results support premeditation. Is she cooperating? Not yet. I didn't expect her to. When I hung up, I walked to the window and looked out over the quiet street below. The trust funds were secure. The guardianship petition was denied. The break line was documented. The break-in was recorded. Everything was on paper now, and paper doesn't argue. I straightened the stack of documents on my lap and focused on keeping my breathing steady. 6 months after the arrest, I sat inside a Colorado Springs courtroom again, but this time the stakes were higher than a denied petition. This wasn't family court. This was criminal court. Vanessa sat at the defense table wearing a gray suit that looked chosen for sympathy. Her hair was pulled back, minimal makeup-controlled posture. She wasn't live streaming anymore. She wasn't speaking to the camera. She was listening to her attorney outline strategy. The charges were formal now. Burglary, attempted fraud, reckless endangerment tied to vehicle sabotage, criminal mischief. The prosecution didn't open with drama. They opened with timeline. 9:03 p.m. IP login from Vanessa's home network. 9:47 p.m. Crash on Highway 24. 10:31 p.m. Vanessa delivers my belongings to the hospital. 11:12 p.m. First attempted trust transfer. Then came the forensic testimony. The automotive examiner took the stand and explained the brake line incision clearly. He described the depth of the cut, the angle, and why it was inconsistent with road debris or normal wear. Could this occur accidentally? The prosecutor asked. No, he replied. The damage is consistent with deliberate partial severing using a sharp instrument. The defense attempted to argue contamination, improper handling, speculation regarding who could have accessed the vehicle. The examiner remained steady. The cut occurred prior to the crash. The force of braking completed the failure. I didn't look at Vanessa during that testimony. I didn't need to. Next came the bank representative. He explained the trust access logs, the dual authentication process, and the fact that the transfer requests were initiated through Vanessa's credentials. Was Captain Cole able to authorize transactions at that time, the prosecutor asked. No, the banker replied. She was not logged in. The requests remained pending. Then the prosecution introduced the security footage from my condo. The video showed Vanessa unlocking the cabinet, retrieving the company seal, and placing it next to a blank check. The defense tried to frame it as misunderstanding. Family access, they argued. Shared property. But the prosecution pointed out the silent alarm activation, the forced removal of documents, and the fact that I was not present or consenting. The detective testified next, outlining how the evidence tied motive to action. Financial pressure from private lenders. Escalating attempts to access trust funds. Guardianship petition filed days after the crash. The defense shifted strategy mid-trial. They argued emotional distress. They claimed Vanessa was under financial strain and made poor decisions under pressure. They suggested she believed I was unstable after the accident and was attempting to secure family assets for protection. The prosecution didn't need to shout that down. They simply replayed the audio clip. She's not dead. I'll get access. The courtroom was quiet when that played. I felt the words again, but this time without shock. Just confirmation. When I took the stand, I kept my answer short. Yes, I authorized no transfers. Yes, Vanessa had a spare key. Yes, she had previously requested large sums from the trust. No, I did not grant her permission to access my office that night. No, I was not cognitively impaired following the crash. The defense tried to imply resentment between sisters, childhood rivalry, disputes over inheritance. Did you ever argue about money? The defense attorney asked. We discussed accountability, I replied. That answer landed cleanly. The prosecution closed with structure, motive, opportunity, action. The defense closed with emotion, stress, misunderstanding, family conflict. The jury deliberated for nearly a full day. I spent that time reviewing emails from my unit. Normal operations continued. Briefings scheduled. Reports filed. The Army doesn't pause for personal trials. Late the next afternoon, we were called back into the courtroom. The four persons stood. On burglary, guilty. On attempted fraud, guilty. On reckless endangerment related to brake tampering, guilty. On criminal mischief, guilty. The words didn't echo dramatically. They were measured. Final. Vanessa didn't cry immediately. She sat still, absorbing the verdict like it was a delayed realization. Sentencing was scheduled separately, but the conviction itself shifted everything. Outside the courthouse, there were no reporters this time either. Just a few onlookers who recognized her from social media. Thomas shook my hand. You handled that well, he said. I followed the paperwork. He smiled slightly. That's the point. Sentencing occurred several weeks later. The judge emphasized premeditation in the brake tampering. Financial motive tied to physical risk. Abuse of trust. Vanessa received multiple years in state prison with structured restitution requirements tied to the financial counts. Not life, not dramatic, real. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse alone. The air felt different than it had 6 months earlier. Not lighter, just settled. Back at Fort Carson, my security manager called me into his office one last time regarding the case. The conviction resolves the review, he said. Your clearance remains intact. No ceremony. No applause, just documentation updated. My promotion board timeline resumed, delayed slightly by administrative review, but not derailed. That night I returned to my condo and sat at the same desk Vanessa had used to attempt forgery. The company seal was back in its cabinet. The spare key was no longer in circulation. I opened the trust portal one more time and reviewed the balance. Everything remained intact. The financial damage had been prevented. The physical damage had been proven. The legal process had done what it was designed to do. My phone buzzed softly on the desk. A notification from the State Correctional Facility System. Incoming mail. From Vanessa Cole. I looked at the envelope when it arrived 2 days later. Handwritten. Carefully addressed. I stood in the living room holding it for a long moment, then walked to the fireplace. The paper curled quickly once the flame touched it. No ceremony, just finality. The smoke drifted upward and disappeared. I watched it until there was nothing left to read. The ash settled quietly against the metal grate as the last edge of the envelope curled inward. I didn't rush to open a window. I didn't change my mind. I let it burn completely until the paper collapsed into gray dust. Whatever Vanessa had written, apology, blame, manipulation, or strategy, no longer mattered. The next morning I drove to base before sunrise. Routine feels different after chaos. The gate guard scanned my ID, saluted, and waved me through like any other day. No one mentioned the trial in the parking lot. No one whispered. That's how you know something is truly over in the Army. When people stop talking about it. My security manager met me with a thin folder. Final clearance review completed, he said. No adverse findings. Incident closed. I signed the acknowledgement page. No dramatic speech, no congratulations. Just a line that read, "Member remains eligible for continued access at current level." That sentence protected more than my job. It protected years of work. Later that week, I met with the promotion board liaison officer. My packet had been delayed 2 cycles due to the open criminal matter, but the conviction and formal closure of the investigation cleared the administrative hold. You lost some time, he said. But not trajectory. Trajectory. I could live with that. Back at my condo, the space felt different now. Not haunted. Just finished. I had already contacted a realtor about selling the family house months earlier, but I hadn't acted. The conviction changed that. The Victorian home where Vanessa and I grew up had become evidence in my mind. Not because of the walls, but because of the memories attached to them, arguments over money, subtle resentments, unspoken comparisons. I listed it. The sale closed faster than expected. The housing market in Colorado Springs doesn't wait for family drama. When the proceeds transferred into the trust account, I didn't redistribute them between us. I restructured them. A portion was placed into a scholarship fund in my parents' names, specifically for children of active duty service members. I worked with Thomas and a financial advisor to draft the documentation properly. Board members selected. Distribution guidelines clear. Oversight independent. The first scholarship announcement went out 6 months later. No press release with my face on it. No interviews. Just paperwork and opportunity. Angela came over that evening with a bottle of wine and a grin. You turned attempted murder into a non-profit, she said. I turned chaos into structure, I corrected. She laughed. You're impossible. Maybe, but structure is reliable. People aren't always. Occasionally, I received updates from the state correctional facility regarding restitution payments. They were small, structured through wage garnishment inside the prison system. The numbers weren't significant. The accountability was. One Saturday morning, I drove up to the cemetery where our parents are buried. The snow had melted, replaced by early spring grass. The headstone was simple, names carved cleanly. I stood there without rehearsing anything in my head. I handled it, I said quietly. Not for praise, just acknowledgement. Vanessa's name wasn't carved anywhere nearby. She was still alive, serving her sentence in a state facility a few hours away. People sometimes ask if I feel guilt. I don't. I feel clarity. The break line wasn't an accident. The transfer requests weren't misunderstandings. The break-in wasn't confusion. It was escalation. And escalation has consequences. Back at base, life continued with its predictable rhythm. Briefings, evaluations, planning cycles. My performance reports reflected the same consistency they always had. The board eventually convened. When the email arrived notifying me of selection for promotion, I read it once, then again. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just earned progression. Later that afternoon, I stood in uniform in front of a small group of colleagues while my new rank was pinned on. Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker shook my hand firmly. You navigated that well, he said quietly. I followed process, I replied. He nodded once. That was enough. That night alone in my condo, I opened the trust portal one final time, not to check for threats, but to review stability. The numbers were steady. The scholarship account active. The audit trail clean. No pending transfers. No suspicious logins. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Some revenge stories end with shouting. Some end with violence. Mine ended with documentation, court orders, and institutional stamps. Vanessa once believed that blood guaranteed loyalty. It doesn't. Trust is built on action. And when someone cuts a brake line, they don't get the benefit of family doubt. They get evidence. The next morning, I ran the same route I used to before the accident. The air was clear. The road dry. As I passed the curve where my car had gone through the guardrail months earlier, I didn't slow down out of fear. I slowed down out of awareness. Then I kept driving. I don't tell this story because it's dramatic. I tell it because it's real. Family betrayal doesn't always look like shouting or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it sounds like protection. And sometimes it hides behind words like stress, misunderstanding, or doing what's best. What I learned is simple. Blood doesn't excuse sabotage. Shared history doesn't cancel accountability. If someone in your life treats you like an obstacle instead of a person, that's not family loyalty. That's a warning. This wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, about protecting my career, my name, and the work my parents built. And if you're facing family drama that crosses into manipulation or harm, document everything. Stay calm. Use process. Justice isn't loud. It's methodical. If you're drawn to real family revenge stories, grounded in military discipline and real-world consequences, subscribe to the channel. There's more here than drama. There's strategy, resilience, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to win.